So we're going to do a quick synopsis of some parts of the scientific / engineering method. The science engineering method approach is a dynamic process that never ends. We use a series of sequential, logical steps to explore and explain natural phenomena and help us solve engineering problems. One of the key features about getting hired at any type of job is your ability to solve problems. People want good problem solvers, and no matter what walk of life you're in, sports, medicine, business, engineering, science, whatever, strong problem solving skills are a very desirable asset and skill set. Now, we're only going to be worried about the scientific method, but you can see here I put the engineering method over here so that you can look at it on your own time and see what the difference is. But remember, for the scientific method, it always starts with an observation. We then ask a question. We do our research. We construct a hypothesis. We set up an experiment that's going to answer or test our hypothesis and answer our question. We've got to make sure the procedure in our experiment's working, so we run a control. If we don't get the desired outcome with our control or our known, then we've got to look at our experiment to see if it's set up right. If it is working, we continue running the experiment to generate more data to help us address our hypothesis and answer our question. Once we get the results, we analyze them. Is the results answer the hypothesis? Yes or no? If it doesn't, do we have to revisit our hypothesis, make a new one? Maybe we ask a new question, and then we communicate our results. Remember, this is, because it has this loop here, we're always going to be refining something, making a new hypothesis, making a new observation. At some point we might stop, we've got the information we need, but this can always be gone further. The engineering method is very similar. So it always starts with an observation. Here are some observations here. I'm not going to read them all, but let's look at a couple of them real quick. When I eat bananas with pancakes, I feel fine, but when I eat them with eggs, I get gassy. So there's a relationship between bananas and pancakes and bananas and eggs. I charge my phone for 15 minutes and I get 1 hour of talk time. But if I double the time that I charge my phone, I don't get double the talk time, right? When I bought a phone 3 years ago, I only need one charge to last a full school day. Now I need 2 full charges to last a full school day. So these are basic observations. No questions yet, no hypothesis of reasons why yet. So here is the breakdown of the scientific method. Remember, it all starts with an observation. So here's your observation, feeds into the question. So we make an observation, we ask a question, right? We do our research, we come up with a hypothesis based on what I know. This is what I expect the outcome we'll see out of my research. So now I know this, I have this question, I think this is what's the explanation. I'm going to try it with my experiment, run my experiment, generate some more observations and facts, what we call that data, analyze the data. What does it mean? Can I interpret it? Do I need to run more experiments? Do I have enough here to answer my question? Come up with a conclusion. Does my conclusion support my hypothesis? Yes, that's great. No, the results are different than I expected. Do I have to revisit my hypothesis? Maybe I run my experiment differently. Maybe I need to do more research, or maybe I ask a different question. The results are what I expected. This is something new, so let's publish it. And those are, in a nutshell, the quick steps of the scientific method. Now, we could spend all day going over all these things in more detail, but that's the nutshell of it for you guys. A hypothesis statement is not a question. It's never a question. It's a predictive statement. If I do this, this should happen. Right? Based on my knowledge, if I do this, this should happen. Here's some examples. If I step on the gas pedal more, the car will go faster. Adding fertilizer to the plant will make it grow faster. Remember, the hypothesis statement must be testable with an experiment. If it's not, then it's not a good hypothesis statement. An example of an observation: the grass in the mostly shady spot of the field is generally thicker and grows faster than that in the mostly sunny side of the field. So one question we could ask is, what is the cause of this observation? Why does the grass grow faster in the shady side? Now that you have your question, you made your observation, there's a question based on the observation, you're trying to find information to answer your question and explain your observation. So where do you look for this type of information? Well, this information should be found in a couple of sources, and this is not all of them. But you're going to look for it in previous work published in respectable sources. What do I mean by respectable sources? Respectable sources are sources that are relevant to the topic that you are investigating, for example, in this case, grass growth, and written by experts in that particular field. Furthermore, if that particular expert study was also reviewed by other experts and determined to be of sound quality, in other words, good quality, and the results were believable and repeatable, and therefore of sound results, then that is a respectable source. Now, there's all kinds of respectable sources out there, all kinds of journals in chemistry, medicine, mechanics, biology, whatever, right? Non-respectable sources would be just random stuff you read on the internet, like Facebook or TikTok or anything like that. Some of the other ones: similar observations based on unknown causes. Let's say you have a question about why the what would happen if I put high performance fuel in a low performance car engine. And you don't have a good answer to that yet. Nobody's done that study, but they have done a study. If they put high performance jet fuel in a low performance jet engine, they do see an improvement in performance. So you would expect the vice versa, that if you put low performance jet fuel in a high performance engine, you would get reduced performance. And you can carry that over to a car. Low performance car gas in a high performance car engine would probably yield reduced performance. Last one would be clues from the environment, or let's say you learned on the field thing that we're talking about that somebody fertilized the field only in the shady spot the day before. That could be an explanation of why the grass is growing quicker there than the other one, and not some type of other higher order rationalization. So you want to get your information from as reliable and as sound resources as you can. So once you have your explanations, now you can start to look at them and try to rate them, which ones you think are the most likely to occur. And so in this particular case, let's say we did a bunch of article reading and we found that temperature and sunlight were the main causes of differences in grass growth. So here's an experiment that we can set up that looks at temperature, and this experiment here looks at sunlight. Now, this is sunlight, but the direct relationship between sunlight and drying out of the grass. As the sun hits the grass, it heats it up a lot, not the area around it, just the sunlight heats up the grass blades, and therefore causes the grass blades to evaporate more water. More water out of the grass blades means that the grass blades are dried. We know that you need water as part of the ingredients in the photosynthesis reaction to make glucose, which is the plant's energy and allows it to grow. And therefore, if we don't have water, we can't make as much glucose, and therefore the plant doesn't go fast. So we can look at these. This one is temperature. We do know that if we heat up the air temperature in the summertime, we've made observations that the grass doesn't grow that fast. So maybe that's the part of the equation. The other two here are possible answers, but is less likely to have occurred than the first two. So let's go with the first two for the future right now. So again, here are the explanations, and we're going to say that the two key variables here are the amount of sunlight and the temperature of grass. And those are things we're going to test. So now that we have two potential factors that cause the difference in grass growth, we can come up with hypotheses for each and then test them. First one, if I increase the sunlight, the grass should not grow as fast. Second one, if I decrease the temperature, make things cooler, the grass growth should increase. Both of these hypotheses are testable and we will yield clear results. Remember, in order for your hypothesis to be valid, it needs to be testable and based on your observation and answer your question. So now you come to your experimental step, and you need to set up your experiment that is going to answer your question and address your hypothesis statement. So you're going to run a controlled experiment, and what that means is you're going to control all of the parameters you can, or all the variables that you can, except for one of them, and that is called the independent variable. The independent variable is the parameter that you change. You manipulate or change. You change or manipulate the experiment. How do you know which one it is? It's the one that's I. I change the variable. Independent. It's not independent of anything. It's the one that you change. So it starts with the letter I. The dependent variable is the variable that you measure in response to the experiment or process. So you're going to change the independent variable, or you're going to manipulate the independent variable. You're going to run your experiment, and then you're going to get an output. And that output is the dependent variable. It is what is measured. It depends on what you do with this variable, right? It's dependent on what happens to the independent variable. So after your experiments run, you're going to generate a lot of data. What are you going to do with that data? You are always going to try to plot it. Make an XY plot of the data to look for any type of relationship between the two data. What I mean by relationship, I mean, is there a correlation? Is there a positive trend? Is there a negative trend? Can I write an equation to describe the data? Is it a line? Is it an exponential curve? Is it a parabola? Is it a circle? Whatever, right? Can I explain the data using a mathematical equation, which then it would allow me to make predictive properties and hopefully help me explain what's going on with my observation, right? And it also will answer our hypothesis. But there's a right way and a wrong way to do this. And the right way is to always put your independent variable as the x-axis, or the x value in your plot. And your dependent variable is going to be your y value. All right? When you make a table of your data, you're going to put your independent variable as your x and your dependent variable as your y. And then you could just come up with a bunch of numbers here. So let's say here we have 30 degrees C, 40 degrees C, 50 degrees C, and then 60 degrees C. And then here we have 6.5 centimeters, 8.1 centimeters, 12 centimeters, and then we have 8.3 centimeters. So plot that data and see what the curve looks like. Draw a best fit curve through it. See if you can model it using something. Without the plot, you can't visually see your data and see if there is a trend or not, or a strong relationship or not. Gotta plot your data. And remember, x value is your independent variable, dependent variable is your y value. And we have practice on this, and there is software programs to allow you to do this at a flick of a switch. So you don't really have to hand draw any of this. That concludes the lesson on, shortened lesson on the scientific method.